Digging ditches. Beck and I were digging ditches last week out here, putting irrigation piping in for when they pour the concrete. So this is especially close to her heart and mind this week as we dig ditches. I thought it was a good date night. She, on the other hand, didn't agree. I went and bought her ice cream when we were done, so I made up for it. If you have your bulletins with you, there are notes in there. Take notes in there. I love filling in blanks. I'm just that way. I like a good blank, and I like a good answer for my blank. So if you're the kind of person that loves putting answers in blank spots, then by all means, grab a pen, grab that insert, and follow along today. You guys ever played the what if game? Oh, yeah. What if? Yeah, we all play the what if game. So it kind of starts like this. It's when you start saying to yourself, if only I had blank, life would be easier, better, or happier, right? So here's a couple of if only I had answers we typically have. If only I had time, life would be easier, right? If only I had more hair, life would be easier. That's, Lord heal me. Maybe if only I had a different job, okay, life would be easier, better, or happier. If only I had a husband. Or maybe if only I had a husband who had a job. Or maybe if only I had a husband with a job who looks like Brad Pitt. Maybe that's your secret prayer. I don't know. But whatever it is, we all, at some point, play that what-if game. If only I had a better car. If only I had, a child. If only I had better health. If only I had... And the list of things we can insert into that spot is really never ending, right? And here's the funny thing about it. If God answers our prayers and fills that spot in, we always find something else to start saying, if only I had, right? I mean, it's only a matter of time before we feel like there's something else we start to put into that empty spot. But today I want you to listen to this message through the lens of your greatest need. All of us right now are facing a greatest need, whether it's a struggle in a marriage, whether it's a relationship with a child still living at home or an adult child or a parent, whether it's a health issue, whether it's a job status, whatever it is, whether it's a decision to be made and we don't know which direction to go, whether it's health insurance, whatever it is, we are all facing something. And I want you to pull that thing out, the thing that you try not to think about because it's so huge, it seems so impossible, and you get this feeling of devastation the minute you think about it. I want you to listen to this message today with the lens of that thing in front of you, okay? So we're going to be talking about Elisha, and we're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 3, so you can open up your YouVersion app, or you can open up your old school Bible, whatever, and follow along in 2 Kings chapter 3. We'll be starting in verse 9. So I'll give you a little backdrop on this. This is a story where 3 kings have come together to join forces against the Moabites. 3 against 1. I mean, if you go out into the street right now, 3 against 1, it's pretty, unless you're like the Hulk or something, the 3 is going to be a pretty easy win over the 1, and we would expect that. And that is what these 3 kings expected. They expected 3 of us combining our forces together will overwhelm the Moabites. It'll be easy. It'll be done. We'll be home by dinner. They're telling their wives, hey, yeah, you can cook dinner. I'll be home by 5. No problem. I'll probably stroll in at 3:30 and have time for afternoon lemonade. It's going to be easy. It's going to be a cakewalk. We'll be right back. This isn't even going to be a thing. So that's what they do. However, it did not go as planned. Imagine that. They went out into the desert and they marched around the desert for 7 days with a plan to attack the Moabites. The problem is, after 7 days in the desert, they ran out of water. They didn't have water for themselves, and they didn't have water for their animals. They weren't driving Ford Escalades, Cadillac Escalades, Ford Explorers, whatever. They weren't driving cars. It's not like they were driving their vehicle with AC on and said, hey, pass me water. They weren't doing that. They were riding animals. Their animals needed water. They needed water. They were out. And they were 7 days in the middle of the desert. And they were supposed to have been doing something that was going to be easy. 3 nations, 3 kings against 1. Go out there, topple them over, wipe them out, go home, have dinner. Done. Easy. And it's not. So this is where we find them. 2 Kings chapter 3. As we read this, there's a story that, or a principle that we're going to learn with this story. And this is in your notes. The first thing is this. Your greatest need. Remember I told you to think about what that is. Say, what's the greatest thing you're facing in life today? Your greatest need becomes a blessing when it drives you to depend on God. That thing that you are facing today, that thing that you are going to have to face the reality of dealing with in the days and weeks ahead of you, that thing that feels like a curse, the thorn in your flesh, the fun sucker from your life, it can become a blessing when it drives you to depend on God. 2 Kings chapter 3. Let's read the story. So the king of Israel set out with the king of Judah and the king of Edom. After a roundabout march of 7 days, the army had no more water for themselves or for the animals with them. What? Exclaimed the king of Israel. He's probably thinking, what are you thinking? Who's in charge of the water? You're fired. So, okay, has the Lord called us 3 kings together only to deliver us into the hands of Moab? But Jehoshaphat asked, is there no prophet of the Lord here through whom we may inquire of the Lord? An officer of the king of Israel answered, well, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water over the hands of Elijah. Jehoshaphat, one of the kings, said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. Okay, so they're out here in the desert, and they're in a pickle. They found themselves in a situation. So they're like, okay, well, anybody here have the 1-2 on God? Any phone number? Anybody? Anybody got an email? Anybody? No. Well, hey, there's this one guy, Elisha. Yeah, he might. Let's go talk to him. He's probably got a direct line. Well, okay. If you don't remember, I'll refresh you as to who Elisha is. Okay, Elisha, Elisha, was mentored by Elijah. Slightly different. Elisha mentored Elisha. And if you know about the prophet Elijah, when the nation was in great drought, he called on God, and God sent a rain cloud that started the size of a hand and brought about one of the biggest storms from the smallest clouds. And so they're thinking, well, Elisha poured water over Elijah's hand, so surely he can bring the rain. What? Okay, that's a pretty loose connection, first of all. That's like saying Pastor Dave was in the mechanic shop last week, and the mechanic fixed his brakes. My brakes are broken, so I think Dave could probably fix my brakes, because I was in the mechanic shop last week and touched the mechanic. Now I have the ability, but okay, so all right. If Elijah did that, maybe Elisha can help us as well. Elisha was in the middle of his rookie year as a prophet. He was busy. He parted the Jordan. He spoke to a poisoned spring. He was made fun of and called Baldy and caused bears to come out of the woods and maul the guys who were calling him Baldy. I'm not kidding. It's in the Bible, 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 and 24. It happened. It's there. It's pretty cool. You should read it. So there's a lesson there, by the way. Don't ever make fun of a guy who's bald or who's balding, because you never know how close a bear is and how close that guy is to God. So don't make fun of bald people. That's a biblical lesson right there. No. Okay, so Elisha cops an attitude. He does. You want God in your life now? Okay, so you have to remember that these 3 kings were not exactly what we would consider fearful of God. Well, one was, Jehoshaphat, but the other 2 were not. They didn't have a strong relationship with God. They weren't, church goers. They just weren't. They didn't ask God or petition Him for direction and guidance, and He was not even a thought. So, of course, now that they're in trouble, now that they're in a situation, now God is a thought, right? So Elisha, he kind of gets snarky with them. So you want God in your life now? Really? You know where you learned this from? He learned it from his mentor, Elijah. Elijah was the king of attitude. So if you don't know the story, I'll remind you. One time Elijah, he went to 450 false prophets who worshiped the false god Baal, and he said, and this is my interpretation, boys, let's have a little contest. Let's see how big your God is. We'll get 2 bulls. You kill one, I'll kill one. We'll make a couple of altars. You call on your God to send fire from heaven. If your God doesn't, and my God does, then you worship my God. If your God does, and my God doesn't, then we'll worship your gods. Let's go, boys. Let's bring it. So, these false prophets, they call on God. Send fire, you know, maybe they're dancing around, you know, doing some, beating their chest and makeup, I don't know. But they're send fire. Nothing's happening. Okay? So, Elisha is kind of laughing at him, kind of making fun of him. Come on, he says, maybe you should shout louder. Maybe God's deaf. Maybe your God's deaf. Maybe your God's on vacation. That's it. He's on the beach in Florida. He's not going to answer right now. Okay, you read it. This is basically what he says. He said, maybe your God's in the bathroom and can't hear you. Elisha is getting kind of snotty. Elijah is getting kind of snarky with these people. You know, he's just making fun of them. He knew what was going to happen. You know, you ever do that? Okay, let's just see how that works out. Yeah. So, where's Josiah? Where is he? He's hiding. Oh, he's out there. Okay. So we brought back Michigan cherries with us. So Josiah wanted to eat some cherries, but he wanted to take them down the basement. I said, no, you don't. I'm going to find cherry pits all over the house for a month. No way. You can eat them up here with me and your sister. No, I'll clean up. I said, okay, well, what happens if you don't clean up? He said, I'll do some extra chores. Okay, all right, but I get to pick the chores. He goes, okay. I want the kitchen floor scrubbed by hand. I want all the trash cans emptied and cleaned inside with soap and water. And I want the garage door to the garage scraped off and repainted. And he's like, okay. And he starts walking down to eat his cherries in the basement. And I looked at Dabney and I said, I'm getting my garage door painted. And she gives me a high five, you know. And it's like, yeah, go down there and eat them. That's fine. I'll deal with the cherry pits because I get my garage door painted and the floor scrubbed. And, you know, I'm just kind of mocking him a little bit, you know. And we were just having fun with that. But that's what Elisha is doing. He knows what's going to happen. You kill one bull, I'll kill the other, and I'll make fun of you for a while, and then I'll call my God, and I'll prove I'm right. But I'm going to let it go for a while because I'm going to have a lot of fun making fun of you because you're acting like an idiot. So I'm going to let you do that for a while. And that's where Elisha learned it from. That's where he got his attitude. That was his mentor. His mentor threw attitude like crazy, and so Elisha throws attitude at these 3 kings. So Elisha says this in verse 13. Elisha said to the king of Israel, why do you want to involve me? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. Really? I mean, that's like the biblical version of go ask mommy. I mean, that is the biblical equivalent of, you know, they come for you to help and you're like, really? You want my help now? Go run to mama. I mean, that's what's going on here. He's got a huge attitude. So, why are you trying to involve me? And then he says this. The king of Israel responds this way. He says, no. The king of Israel answered, because it was the Lord who called us 3 kings together to deliver us into the hands of Moab. Elisha said, now he's going to get smart alecky again. As surely as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, if I did not have respect for the presence of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, I would not pay attention to you. Remember, Jehoshaphat was the only one of the 3 kings who actually feared God, who actually had a concern for God, and was fearful of him, and was reverent and respectful of him. He wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. He wasn't living the way he was supposed to be living, but he did have a fear and a respect for God. Thereto had no care at all whatsoever. So because of that, Elisha took pity on him. Maybe he took pity on him. Wait till you see what he asked him to do. So he says in 2 Kings 3:15, he says, now bring me a harpist. Yeah. You guys ever seen a harp? A real harp? Not one of those little teeny tiny ones. A real one? They're big. They're heavy. They're huge. I'm sure when they went out into the desert, they strapped one of those things on a trailer and were towing it with their Escalade, right? So they had a harp ready and available because they had been dragging it through the desert, and they had somebody to play that thing. That request in itself was not going to be easy. However, he created some mood music, right? So they provide the harpist. Okay, 2 Kings 3, 15 and 16 says, then it happened. When the musician played, that's the harpist, creating the mood music, and Elisha wanted the music in order to create the mood so that he could communicate and hear from God. Okay, so the kings are expecting the word of hope and of faith, and they're waiting for it, and God's going to send rain. Oh, thank goodness for Elisha. This is great. This is great news. Okay, so then Elisha, he listens to the music. It's played. And then he declares that the hand of the Lord has come upon him. And he said, this is what the Lord says. Make this valley full of ditches. What? No, you don't understand. See, we're thirsty. We've been out here 7 days. Our horses and camels and everything's dying. We're dying. That guy over there is passed out cold. You want us to do what now? Dig ditches. Dig ditches in the desert. Anybody here think that makes sense? Yeah, no. Not at all whatsoever. How many of you guys have ever done yard work outside when it's hot out? Okay, when it gets hot out and you get thirsty, what do? Right. So if you were out there and you're out working in the field maybe, or you're out working in the yard and it's hot, and you yell to your wife or you yell to the husband, hey, can you bring me some water? And they come out and they say, well, I'd like to bring you some water. However, the word of the Lord has come to me and says, you need to dig another irrigation line that way. What would the response be from your spouse who's been out there? I know what my wife would do to me if I said that to her. I'd get beat. Really? Get me some water now. This is what Elisha relays as God's message to these three kings and their people who are out just parched of thirst and looking at death is not in fact relief, but manual labor in the heat and the sun of the desert. It makes no sense. Remember, greatest need becomes a blessing, and it drives you to depend on God. Verse 17 says this, for this is what the Lord says, you will see neither wind nor rain, yet this valley will be filled with water, and you, your cattle, and your other animals will drink. This is an easy thing in the eyes of the Lord. He will also deliver Moab into your hands. So this story is the context for today. They dug the ditches. They did as they were asked. This is the context for us today. But we need to determine what this means for us. Because while this is a great story, there is a lesson here for us to learn from this. There is something for us to apply here. There is something for us to take away from this as we walk out those doors and go about living our week this week. And what is that? So I want to say this, and I want us to repeat it again all together. Faith that works. Say it with me. Faith that works. One more time. Faith that works. So that's kind of a play on words. Because I'm talking about faith that is effective. In other words, faith that moves the heart of God and it invokes a response from God. I'm talking about faith that works. At the same time, I'm not just talking about faith that is effective, but I'm also talking about faith that is active. Faith that works. Faith does something. Faith that so believes that God is going to act that we act and take a step toward God, believing that God is going to take a step towards us. There's this, Hollywood's given us lots of good material, lots of bad material too, but in this case, a good one. How many guys have seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? I think that's the one. One of the last ones. Okay, so he's searching for the Holy Grail, which is supposed to be like the cup that Jesus drank from, right? And this is like kind of towards the tail end of the movie, and he's got a riddle for each part of this maze he's got to get through to get to this Holy Grail. Each part has a riddle. And he makes it through the thing like that's supposed to stab him all over the place, and he makes it through the thing that's supposed to cut off his head, and he makes it through the big boulder that's supposed to squish him, and he lands and he's at this ledge. And there's this giant ledge and this huge they're up a cliff. You can't even see the bottom, right? And the other side of this cliff, way over there, is an entrance to something on the other side. But there's no way to get from here to there. So he's sitting there repeating the riddle over and over and over again, trying to figure out how in the world do I get from here to there. Because there isn't a guy on the other side saying, hey, grab the rope and swing on over. There's not a guy over there saying, hey, I'll pass it to you, go along, and going to throw that thing to him. There isn't somebody screaming, hey, throw me a rope and I'll catch you. There's nobody there. There's a huge expanse and a riddle, and he's got to try to figure this out. And the ultimate result is, it was a step of faith. He had to step out, and there was nothing below him. And the minute he stepped out in faith, if you saw the movie, you know what pops up. All of a sudden he steps out and he steps onto this thing, and all of a sudden what comes into view is this pathway that goes all the way across the other side. But you never, ever, ever will see that unless you take the step of faith. You can stand there and stare at it all day long. You would never have seen that unless you took a step of faith. That is faith in action. So, 2 principles of faith that works. These are in your notes. So if you like to fill in the blanks, this is the next one. Only God can send the water, but sometimes he wants you to dig a ditch. James 2:26 says, just as the body is dead without breath, so also faith is dead without good works. You really think God needed those soldiers to dig ditches? Do you think God was really sitting there in heaven going, man, I'm going to do this? Well, if I can convince them to dig a couple ditches, then I can get water to them. Then it makes it possible. No. God made the entire universe in 6 days. God builds mountains, makes oceans, breathes life into creatures. He doesn't need us to dig a ditch in the desert. Doesn't need that. Only God can send the water, but sometimes he wants to see your faith. He wants you and I to dig a ditch. Show me your faith, and I'll show you my faithfulness. See, God loves to see your faith. All over the New Testament, you'll see it again and again. The Bible will say, when Jesus saw their faith, that phrase. When you're reading your Bible tonight or this week, look for that phrase. When Jesus saw their faith. God loves to see our faith in action. But how do you see faith? If I'm praying, if I'm down here kneeling and I'm praying, do you say, oh man, look at the smoke rising from Pastor Dave's ears. He must really be praying. Now that's some serious faith. Well, no. You don't see that. When Peter was on the boat, he said, Jesus, if that's you, tell me to come, and I'll come. And Jesus said, well, then come. And Peter did. Right? He got out of the boat. If you were watching that, you'd say, wow, that guy's got a lot of faith. I'm not getting out of this boat. But he did. He must have a lot of, either he's really stupid or he's got a lot of faith in Jesus who's calling him out there. But his actions cause you to say, that's a guy that's got a lot of faith. The other 11 boys in the boat, they didn't see any faith. But that guy that got out of the boat, you could see his faith. You could take a picture of his faith. You could videotape his faith. It was visible. You could talk about it. There could be a story. Well, there is a story around that step of faith. I believe that there are many times when God wants to see us participate in his miracle. It's still his miracle, but he wants us to participate. You see it in stretching out of hands, the story, picking up, Jesus tells God to pick up his mat. The story of the washing of the eyes, the blind man, and he picks up mud and he puts it on his eyes and he has to go and rinse it out. You know, God's not saying, Jesus isn't saying, oh, we're in luck. You happen to be standing right next to the magic mud. Wow, you're in luck. This is so cool. How? I have no idea. So, well, here we go. We'll put some of that magic mud on your eyes. Go rinse it out and you're good. You are so lucky that you happen to be right here. This is the only magic mud anywhere ever to ever exist, and you happen to be right here next to it. And it happens to heal blindness. This is fantastic. No. The reality is that blind man could have been healed with a word, with a wave of a hand, with a thought, with a heartbeat. But God wanted him in that process. God wanted him to participate in the miracle. My marriage to Becky is a miracle. I'm not kidding. I'm glad you didn't all laugh because I'm serious. I'm still serious. That's good. My marriage to Becky is a miracle. But guess what? I had to be involved in the process, right? I had to spend time with her. I had to seek her out. I had to ask her to go do stuff with me. I had to be a part of that process. That was not a miracle that was going to happen if I just did nothing. I believe there are too many people just waiting for God to show them their faithfulness, but they're not showing God any faith. You take a step of faith. You want to quit smoking? Okay. Maybe you throw your cigarettes in the garbage on the way out and say, there's some faith. I'm getting rid of those things. It's a step of faith. Yeah, it's not going to be easy. Neither was digging ditches in the desert after 7 days of exhaustion and practically on the edge of death. You want to heal a relationship that's gone bad? You may forgive before someone else even asks for forgiveness, or treat someone with love when all they are doing is being ugly to you. What's that? You're digging a ditch. Now, I'm not promising you, neither is the Word of God, that doing that would be easy. But that's digging a ditch. That's being involved in the miracle. It's being a participant. You want godly kids. So, I want nothing more in this world. If I leave this world, someday I will. I'm almost 40. That someday is coming sooner than later. But no, I'm just kidding. When I leave this world, I want nothing more than for my kids to love and serve Christ. I don't care if that means they're pastors, missionaries, or if they're running the soundboard, or if they're in a nursery, or if they're a preschool teacher, or they're the custodian. I don't care what that looks like, as long as they are serving the Lord in some way. Maybe Josiah's calling is to work in a factory. That's awesome, if that's where God wants him. If that's his missions field, if he is serving the Lord while working there, awesome. I want nothing more than for my kids to love the Lord and serve him wherever God calls them. To be passionate about Christ. That would be a miracle for my children to have that kind of a love and passion for Jesus. God doesn't need me to make that happen. However, as his parents, he does call me to be involved in that miracle. I'm to be a participant as he creates that miracle in my children. So you know what I did the last 2 weekends? I drove 8 hours up to Lake Ann Camp and dropped off Abby and Josiah to Lake Ann Camp. And then I turned around the next day and drove 8 hours home. Worked for 5 days. Turned around on Friday, drove 8 hours to pick them up. Then turned around and came 8 hours back home on Saturday so they could go to camp. Do you know why I did that? Because Lake Ann is the harp. Lake Ann is the mood music. Lake Ann is the tool that God uses to speak into my children's lives. It's a tool. My job is to bring my kids to the harp. My job is to be a participant in the miracle that God is doing in my children's lives. If I'm going to say to anybody, myself, God, or anybody else, I want my kids to love the Lord, then I better participate in the process, right? Unless my kids are sick, they're at Kids Quest. It's not because I'm one of the pastors here. My children would attend all of those things regardless of my status on staff. My kids are at Kids Quest whenever we have it. My kids are at Awana whenever we have it. Because it's the harp. It's the mood music. It's the thing that allows God to create the miracle of a love for Christ in their lives, to shape their hearts. I was a youth pastor for 16 years, 8 of that here. So, a lot of people will say, I want my kids to serve Jesus and be strong Christians. But they don't bring their kids to Kids Quest. They don't bring their kids to Awana. They don't send them to kids camp. They don't open their Bible and read the Bible with them at home. They don't even read their Bible in front of their kids themselves. They don't pray with their kids at home. They don't share the Word of God at home. when they're at home and they think, man, I am so blessed, they don't say to their kids, aren't we blessed, kids? Isn't this amazing? Look around. But we want our kids to love God. God doesn't need us to do it. If God wants your child to love him, he will, but he sure as heck wants us involved in the process. You want some water? Dig a ditch. You want your kids to love the Lord? Dig a ditch. How about money? This isn't a message on tithing, by the way, but it's there. Some people say, I want more money. Okay. I want more money. I need more money. Got to have more money. I'm going to work more hours. I'm going to get more money. If you tithe personally, I'm not asking for hands. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to say this. If you tithe, then you know what God can do with 90% of your income is way more than he ever has done with 100% of your income. And you know that's true. You sacrifice financially. The reality is, the result is God does more with what you keep after you give him the first and the very best than anything he'll do when you keep it all. So, only he sends the water, but he asks us to dig a ditch. So, being in youth ministry long enough, and then being with college students long enough, and there's an overarching feeling among young men as they get older and they graduate from high school, and the one they start feeling like I want a woman, I want to get married, and when's God going to send my mate to me? And so sometimes you find yourself oh man, I want a wife, God send me a wife. And then you want to say to them, well, you're sitting on your butt at home waiting for some smoking hot babe to knock on your door, and she's going to be carrying a Bible, and she's going to say, hey, big stud, take me to church. Okay, does it really work that way? No. What are you doing? Go to the gym, iron your shirt, fold your collar down, sell your Xbox and move out of mom's basement. Dig a ditch. Right? Oftentimes we are waiting for God to perform a miracle in our lives. We're just sitting there going, okay, I'm waiting. I'm faithful, and we were just waiting. And while you're doing that, God says, I want you to do this thing over here. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense. God, I have been praying like crazy for this thing that is in my life, and as of yet, it has not been dealt with. I cannot come over here and do this right now because I am too busy facing this. God says, dig a ditch. I can't bring your rain until you dig a ditch. This makes no sense, though, because how does doing this have any effect on that? Yeah, it might not. But I still want you to dig a ditch. I want you to take a step of faith. The second principle is this. Real faith believes big, but is willing to start small. Believe big. If the size of your dream isn't intimidating to you, it's probably insulting to God. Let's think about that for a second. If the size of your dream isn't so intimidating and scary to you, it's probably an insult to God. Many don't think big enough, and even more won't start small. Anybody here know how you dig a ditch? You pick up a shovel and you start one shovelful at a time, right? Isn't that what generally happens? And if you work at it long enough, eventually you have this ditch that you've dug. Congratulations. It's actually a combination of 300 small shovelfuls, 300 small steps that produce a ditch. Good job. You thought big, but you had to start small. Zechariah 4:10 says, do not despise these small things, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. I'm excited to be able to share with you something that our church is going to be doing here in the coming months and hopefully well into the future. We have always been passionate about reaching out and ministering to the neighborhood that this church is situated in. I mean, we don't want to ignore everybody else, but the natural step is there are people all around this church who drive by it every single day, who live right here in the neighborhood, who stare at this building when they're sipping their evening tea and look at this building and that don't know Christ. Well, that's a problem. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we've done things to start building relationships with the neighborhood, right? We do a big fall festival, and it's fun for us, but really it's about providing an opportunity to meet the neighbors and share the love of Christ through hospitality to them. We let the neighborhood watch use the building. This building has been Red Cross certified, and so anytime there's storms and a threat of inclement weather, the building is available to anybody in the neighborhood to just come in here and hang out in the basement. That's happened twice this spring already. The building's been unlocked and made available, and a couple of neighbors have come. Just knowing that it's available, just knowing that they can come here is a huge message. Right? So, but we're not done. And it's funny that we've been praying about this in my office on the bulletin board. There's this crazy thing of just all this stuff and ways that we need to be ministering and involved in people's lives and how we could do that, and just ideas. They're just thrown up there, and I've just been praying over this thing for like 3 months. And you know what's hilarious is I just happened to get connected with, I want to say by chance, but really, God pushed this person, moved this person, shoved this person in place, and before you know it, here's this meeting that happened. And it was with the director of Habitat for Humanity. And if you don't know, they're building a house 2 streets over in our neighborhood. Habitat for Humanity is building a house from the neighborhood. It's right down the street from your house, isn't it, Kathy? Yeah. So Habitat for Humanity, at the same time that we're saying, man, I really feel like we should be doing something else in our neighborhood. What is that going to look like? Maybe it's home repair. Maybe it's construction. Maybe it's I don't even know what this looks like, but we can do more. We can do better. How do we take the people who love Jesus and have the hope of Christ in them and mingle them with the people who don't know the Lord at all? How do we do that? I've been wrestling with this. And then we have a couple conversations with Habitat for Humanity, and Habitat for Humanity says, hey, guess what? We're trying to figure out how to go beyond just building houses, because when you build a house, you parachute in, you build it, and you parachute out, you're done. But we need to be better than that. We want the house to provide shelter, but we want a long-term relationship to provide the hope and eventually the salvation that is found only in Jesus Christ. But Habitat for Humanity is not built to do that. If only there was somebody that was meant to do and built to do that other part. If only there was somebody in the neighborhood who is good at relationships and good at loving people and loved the Lord and wanted to guide and love a person to a relationship with Jesus. If only that existed. And I said, ooh, I know somebody. I know. Cornerstone will do that. Cornerstone would like to do that. Cornerstone would definitely be involved in that. I think that would be something Cornerstone should be doing. Absolutely. And so you know what's really cool? What's going to happen? Habitat for Humanity has a system in place to manage projects, to raise funds, to determine the scope of work, to order supplies and materials, and do all of that logistical stuff. But you know what they do not have? They do not have manpower, and they do not have the ability to invest in that relationship after the job is done. Guess what we have? We have manpower and the ability to invest in those relationships with those homeowners when the job is done. Talk about a marriage made in heaven. So in just 2 or 3 weeks, as the house is just about done over there and they're ready for landscaping, Cornerstone's piece, I've committed to you all, sorry, but I'm not sorry. I've committed all of you to go over to that Habitat house in about 3 weeks, watch for the emails and the announcements, and we're going to go lay sod and we're going to do all of the landscaping for this family. And while we do it, the family's going to be there working with us. And we're going to be on our knees, putting sod and grass down, planting bushes next to the husband and wife and kids who are moving into this home. And we're going to have an opportunity to get to know them and them to get to know us. And for us to say things like, hey, would you be willing to go get pizza when you're done? I'd love to just go get pizza. Hey, you want to come over? I've got chicken in the fridge. Let's go barbecue over at the house. I mean, this place is going to be a zoo for another couple of days. Come on over after we're done laying sod. Let's just go get some barbecue and have lemonade. Okay, that's the beginning of relationships. where eventually you can share the love of Christ. You can invite them to the Fall Fest. When they show up at the Fall Fest, you can say, hey, Tom, Virginia, really good to see you. That's awesome. How's the house? Maybe we offer to move them into the new house when they're ready to move. The ways that we can come along this family is immeasurable. Right? Isn't that who we want to be? Because that's what we are. Now we just got to dig a few more ditches. Because I know I'm going to be there, but I can tell you this. I've got stuff to do on my days off. I've got one kid that's going to play football in the 56ers. I've got another kid that's playing junior high soccer. I've got another kid that's doing piano and trumpet. We all have busy lives. And I know that I'm asking God, Lord, man, I need more time. And God says, yeah, I hear you. I'm going to need you to give up some more of your time that you don't have already for this thing over here. But we're digging ditches. Our faith is in action. You know the story of Habitat for Humanity? It was founded in 1942. I'm sorry, it was founded in 1976. But in 1942, the founders visited a farm outside of Americus, Georgia, called Koinonia Farm. This was kind of a Christian community that had come together and created this giant farm. And so the Fullers visited Koinonia Farm in 1965. They'd given up a successful business and an affluent lifestyle in Montgomery, Alabama, to begin a life of Christian service. At Koinonia, Jordan and Fuller developed a concept of partnership housing. The concept centered on those in need of adequate shelter, working side by side with volunteers to build simple, decent houses. Since 1976, when Habitat for Humanity was officially formed, they have put 6.8 million people into homes. Zechariah 4:10, let me read it in case you forgot it. Do not despise these small things, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. At some point, they picked a piece of property and they started building a house. It had to start somewhere, right? And that's an example of faith in action. It's an example of taking small steps, even though we don't necessarily see how it's going to meet the bigger picture. How many of you guys heard of Rick Warren? This isn't a plug for Rick Warren. I don't agree with everything he does, but I do appreciate a lot about his ministry. Rick Warren is most famous for this book, Purpose-Driven Church. I read this thing when I was in college, so it's that old. Rick Warren is the pastor of Saddleback Church out in California. It's one of the largest churches in the planet. Got a huge missionary, everything they do is huge. Saddleback Church has influenced this church because we have a mission to help people know God, grow together, and serve others. We have a purpose, right? The Bible gives us a purpose, and we've verbalized that purpose in an easy thing to remember, to help people know, grow, and serve. But the idea isn't new. Here it is, you know. So Rick Warren, in this book, as I was preparing, reminded me of the story of his faith step. And he never in a million years viewed himself the pastor of a mega church, a church that has been as big and impactful and influential as his church. It was never on his radar, never thought it was going to happen, didn't even think that big. But I want to share this little excerpt with you here. I graduated from seminary that December in the final days of 1979. Kay and I packed what little we owned in a U-Haul truck and moved from Texas to Southern California. Our furniture had been handed down from one newlywed couple to another. We were the fifth couple to have it, and it was pretty pathetic-looking stuff, but it was all we had. As we packed, it seemed implausible that this poor young couple was moving to one of the wealthiest communities in America. We arrived in Southern California full of hope. We had a new decade before us, a new ministry, a 4-month-old baby, and God's promise to bless us. But we also arrived with no money, no church building, no members, and no home. We did not know a single person living in the Saddleback Valley. It was the greatest step of faith we had ever taken up to that time. We made it to Orange County on a Friday afternoon, just in time to catch an infamous Southern California traffic jam. I've never understood why they call the slowest traffic the rush hour. We inched along the freeway at a snail's pace, hungry and tired with a crying infant. Since I had grown up in a rural town of less than 500 residents, I was completely unprepared for traffic like this. As I gazed out over miles and miles of cars at a complete standstill in freeway traffic, I thought, what in the world have I gotten myself into? God, you chose the wrong guy for this assignment. I think I've made a big mistake. Many of us can identify with feeling like we've got ourselves in over our heads, or if we think we're being obedient to God and thinking this was not a good idea. Finally, at 5 p.m., we arrived at the Saddleback Valley. I pulled off the freeway and stopped at the first real estate office I could find. I walked in and introduced myself to the first realtor I met. His name was Don Dale. I said with a big smile, "My name is Rick Warren. I'm here to start a church. I need a place to live, and I don't have any money." Don grinned and laughed out loud. I laughed too. I had no idea what would happen next. Don said, "Well, let's see what we can do." Within 2 hours, Don found us a condo to rent, got us the first month's rent for free, and agreed to become the first member of Saddleback Church. God does provide. While driving to the condo, I asked Don if he attended church anywhere. He said he didn't. I replied, "Great, you're my first member." And that is exactly what happened. I began Saddleback Church with that realtor's family in mind. 2 weeks later, we held our first Bible study in our condo with 7 people present. Most of us would think that's insane. You're going to load up your family and move somewhere you don't know anybody, no job, no house, no nothing. We would think that's nuts. But you know what? For Rick and his wife, that was the ditch that God asked them to dig. I cannot bring the blessings. I cannot bring the rain until you show me a step of faith. I want to produce a miracle. I want you to see my hand involved in this. But I want you to be a participant in it, not a bystander. I want to see you actively participating in the miracle I'm about to perform, not a couch observer. And your part is to go dig that ditch, which has seemingly nothing to do with the issues in your life right now. The next morning, 2 Kings chapter 3, verse 20. They went out and dug the ditches, in case you're wondering. The next morning, about the time of offering and sacrifice, there it was, water flowing from the direction of Edom, and the land was filled with water. Thank goodness. All of that just for water. It would have been so much easier if God just said, "Go to bed and tomorrow I'll have water for you." Thank you, thank you, thank you. Miracle again, and moved on. It would have been so much easier. But you know what? If God had done that, you and I would not have learned anything today. The message today would have been, ask God for what you want, go home and go to bed, and tomorrow He'll provide it. It would not have caused us to consider our biggest thing in our life right now as the thing that could very potentially, very possibly, very realistically pull us closer to Him. So hopefully you got the email this week. I was made aware of a situation in Joanne Nickham's basement. How many of you guys get birthday or birthday cards or anniversary cards in the mail from the church? Most of you should at some point, hopefully. You know who sends those cards? Joanne Nickham. Every year. Every birthday and every anniversary, she tries to get those cards out. So I was made aware that there was a situation in her basement. So I'm like, So I called somebody from AccuLevel and I said, "Hey, Jeremy, can you meet me over at this house and tell me what we're looking at here?" So I met one of the guys from AccuLevel over at Joanne Nickham's house, and I went in the basement, and sure enough, there's water coming in through the walls from all 4 sides. The floor's soaking wet. The 2x4s are all wet. The basement walls are finished off, so there's paneling, there's insulation, there's 2x4 walls. There's a bathroom down there, a laundry room. It's all wet. I mean, just imagine just the whole room just soaked. Just soaked. Everything's retaining water. It's just a mess. And it's been that way for a while. And I said to myself, if this was my grandmother's house, there was no way she'd be moving back into this house until this was fixed. The whole house kind of has that musty smell. This needs to be fixed. She has 0 income to fix this. She's a widow. There's no way she could do this on her. In fact, she's not living in the house right now. She had surgery. She's not living there. And frankly, if I had my way, she wouldn't be going back till this is fixed. I said, all right, we need to fix this. So we emailed everybody. We said, hey, we have this need. It's going to cost us about $750. That's the cost for the dumpsters and gloves and face masks and a new dehumidifier to be installed in the basement when we're done, and all of these things seal up around the foundation so that we can reduce how much water is going in the basement. It's about $750. So I sent the email out. And if you didn't respond in 10 minutes, you missed out, because 10 minutes later I had a phone call and somebody said, I'm going to give you $375, matching funds, good for 48 hours. I'm like, okay, cool. I sent another email. I'm like, hey, we have this matching gift offer, 3, 2, 1, go. And I barely hit send, barely got back to my office when the phone rang and 2 emails popped back up, and I had $450 of the $375 matching funds. I had all the money, more than we needed, almost $800 in like 20 minutes. You had to be fast on that one, guys. If you even had to think about it, you missed out. That's how cool, how amazing our God is, and that's how awesome. That's what happens when the people of God respond immediately. They don't think about it. They don't second guess it. Dig a ditch, okay. Dig a ditch, okay. I'm not going to ask why. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to hesitate. Dig a ditch, okay. And if we're really good, we're holding the shovel ready for when we're asked to dig a ditch. We're prepared ahead of time to dig. So I don't have to ask you for money today because you did that. But I am going to ask you for something. Next Saturday, we're going to go over to her house and we're going to fix this problem so Joanne can move back into her house and so it's safe for her. So it's clean, so it's dry. We're going to go do this. I'm going to be there. We're going to go do this from 8 until it's done, hopefully around noon. And I need 10 or 15 people who are going to come and help me do that. And I understand fully everybody's busy and it's summer. I get it. I do. I'm not going to be here, most likely, when Josiah gets back from the missions trip. He will return here on Saturday, and I'll probably still be over there working. I'm not saying that to guilt you. I'm just telling you the reality of I get it. Everybody's busy. But God said, you know what? I need you to go dig a ditch. But God, that doesn't solve my problems. It doesn't get the stuff at my house done. It's going to force me to have to change my schedule on that weekend. And yet, God says, dig a ditch. Okay, fine, I'll dig a ditch. I'm going to go and I'm going to do this at Joanne's house. Pastor Mike is going to be there with me. Pastor Alex is going to be there with us. Justin won't be because he'll be on his way home with the missions team, but I'm sure Justin would be there with us. How many of you are willing to say, I'm going to take Saturday, I'm going to go over and I'm going to take my time and I'm going to invest it in digging a ditch. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to help clean out Joanne's basement. I hope you will.